YouTube, this is RL, the Retro Pizza Guy, coming to you again from my channel, and welcome back to another episode of Retro Life Reviews. It's been a while, we really need to do more of these, CK, but hey, we are back with another classic game, this time a baseball game. We haven't reviewed a baseball game ever. We did a sports games once, that was Blades of Steel, but that's a long time ago, so we're doing another one. And here is my good friend and co-host, CK!
Hello everybody.
Alright, so we review everything on a like, love, and low scale with graphics, music and sound effects, gameplay, controls, difficulty, fun factor, replay value, and story if applicable. So we're going to be reviewing the classic game for the NES, Baseball Stars!
Yes, by SNK for the NES. The game was released in 1989 for the NES and was released across many countries. And the reception was taken well. It was known as the best baseball game on the NES platform at the time of its release, obviously. It spawned 5 sequels. We're reviewing the first one, the one that was the most well-received, the one that won awards. It brings me back to my childhood, because I actually played this when I was younger.
So, what'd you think of the graphics of this game, CK?
I like the graphics of this game. It does fit the very kind of, say, monocolor, but the solid color style of games back between 88 and 91 for the NES. Actually, maybe more 86 to 90 for the NES. And, most of the baseball games back then were fairly similar. Either it was an umpire behind the plate view, which was 90% of the games, or behind the pitcher from second base, where you're pitching to the batter and the camera's over the shoulder of the pitcher. This one uses the classic format of, pitcher on top of the screen, batter at the bottom in a box, and the colors are flat, but they are bright. I do like the styling of it. It's got this kind of retro style on the opening screen. It looks a lot like, older 30s, 40s, 50s baseball type look to it. And the styles of the characters are unique. Once you kind of get into the game, you do see that it's very heavily Japanese influenced with a lot of the kind of character profiles for the random players in the teams. It's nostalgic, but removing that, I do like the fact that it's a very clean, clear baseball looking game. And I give graphics a retro love.
Retro love. Alright, yeah, graphics for me, it's a very clean looking game. I mean, most games from that era have the very similar style and look and play. Top down, kind of more to the side, isometric kind of view in a way, not like top down.
Correct.
I mean, it's nothing groundbreaking, but I didn't even know of this game growing up. I mean, I think I got into baseball games kind of later on, more on the Genesis, because I did play a lot of sports talk baseball for the Genesis. That was the first baseball game that I played, and a few other games that I played on the Genesis, not for NES. So I have no experience with this game. There's no sentimentality. The graphics are crisp, though. I do like the animations. Nice. They're very fluent, and I also like that there's you can have a female team. It's not just males in this. So there's
that's
a
right.
female, and I think that's pretty unique. I don't think a lot of games had that. That was pretty cool. The look of the game is a little too simplistic for my liking, but I mean, again, it's a NES game for that era, and there wasn't a lot of detail they could put in these graphics. They get the job done. They're simplistic. They're not groundbreaking, but they shouldn't have to be. I'm gonna give it a retro double like for graphics. Alright, so moving on to music and sound effects. What do you think of the music and sound effects in this game?
I like the music in this game. At least I love the theme song of it, because you hear it throughout the whole game pretty much. It doesn't have a lot of music per se in it, and the sound effects are fairly straightforward. With regards to the audio kind of sounds of actual speech, like when there's a strike or ball, batters are out. It's like the games back then. It's audible enough. Hitting a ball, the sound of the ball rising and falling, kind of like a slide whistle. It's very simple, And it doesn't really take away from the game. I guess people can get annoyed at the theme song because it's kind of running through the game. It's the same 2 songs for the most part, but it doesn't bother me, and it never did, and I don't think it ever will. And because of that, I give audio kind of a right down the middle, a retro-like.
Alright, so music and sound effects for me. I'm going to start with sound effects first because it's the easiest. Very basic. I just remember playing it, just nothing sounds really like the sound effects. I mean, it's an NES game. I'm being a little harsh on it, obviously, but when I'm thinking of sound effects in a baseball game, I'm thinking more of a cracking of the bat and the sound effects of the umpires saying their umpiry things and the ball hitting a glove. And I didn't really get that feel in this game because the sound effects were very beeps, boops, and basic.
Yes.
NES generation sound effects. Didn't really think it was anything special, but the music as well, 2 tracks, as you said. I was listening to it. I was like, this is all the music? Very simple. Yeah. Very simple. I know I'm being very harsh on it. I'm trying not to make it a retro loathing review, but I don't have any experience with this game, and of course, I'm not a huge baseball fan with the NES era. I mean, I do love baseball. I'm a baseball fan, but as I said, I only got into baseball games after the NES era, in the Sega Genesis era, when the graphics and sound effects were a little bit more accurate to the actual game. So music and sound, nothing special for me. I'm just gonna give it a half like.
Alright, that's okay.
A little harsh. The music was very simple, and it kind of got a little repetitive. It got repetitive very quickly.
Yes.
Anyway, so moving on to gameplay. What'd you think of the gameplay in Baseball Stars, CK?
Gameplay is where this game stands out. I believe gameplay is really where this game received all its accolades, really. Season versus modes. Those are the 2 modes that you can play in it. Where you can play through a whole season. It's got a calendar schedule. You play through it against the 14 different teams. So you pick a team, or you build a team, which is pretty cool. You can build a team, name your players. You can upgrade your players with money earned through wins. Through a season, you can actually upgrade the skills of your players. So you're not just playing them as they are and working with what you got from the get. Setting up your lineup, which I think most of the baseball games have, at least allowing you to change out your pitcher, choose your pitcher at the beginning of the game, and giving you options within your roster. There is a lot going on in this game. Like you said, with regards to kind of the random females on a team, there's actually an all-female team as well, which is pretty damn cool. There is so much going on in this game with regards to the gameplay. Speeding up when you need to run, stealing bases like most baseball games are. Everything that a baseball game would normally have, this game has it. Again, at that era, it's very early in 89, Nintendo really didn't have a ton of things going, and developers weren't pouring a ton of money into these games because they were limited by the carts. But this is where this game stands out. I think it's one of the better baseball games I've played, period, for an 8-bit console. And because of that, I give it a retro double love.
Retro double love. Is this nostalgia talking, CK? Sounds like nostalgia's talking a little bit here, but that's okay. You're allowed to love this game. Alright, so gameplay for me. Yeah, the gameplay, I can understand why the game was popular for its time, even though it's an old game, and I don't really obviously have no nostalgia for this game at all. 0. I still felt the game had some really enjoyable elements to it in the gameplay elements. The smoothness of the animation and the ball being able to use a D-pad to direct where you want, the pretty standard stuff, direct the ball where, the bases, obviously that has always been the case in most baseball games, but some didn't do that,
Yep.
Very smooth and enjoyable. I did enjoy it. I did enjoy the gameplay. I feel it was very technically very polished. I just feel it could have been very messy because at that era they were still in its infancy of sports games on the NES.
Yes.
I don't think they were as polished as the 16-bit era, but it was very simple in nature, but effective. And also the gameplay of this game, I felt it was a very deep game. As you said, this game has a lot of options like team, like All-Stars and elements to season mode or other things. Yeah, the game is very deep. It's a deep game, and the gameplay shows it. The gameplay was very advanced for its time. So I'm going to give the gameplay a retro love.
All right. That's fair, without nostalgia.
That is without nostalgia, yes.
Without nostalgia, that's a pretty fair score, yeah.
Yeah, retro love for me. Move on to the controls. What did you think of the controls in this game, CK?
The controls in Baseball Stars was similar to basically every other baseball game that released on every console for, the next 2 generations. Being able to direct your players, being able to direct the ball to the base you want to, being able to swing a little later or earlier, which can affect whether you're pulling or pushing a ball, left field, right field. Batting with lefties versus righties feels different. I played baseball for the better part of like 9 years of my life, so it carried a lot of those elements, the subtleties and the nuances of actual baseball in a game like this. And I think a lot of baseball games did. The fluidity is really what made this game kind of stand out too. We played games a little later. I've played games a little later in the NES era that didn't feel as polished as this game does, even though it's very simple. Outside of that, I mean, the controls do what the controls do, and they do exactly what every baseball game requires you to do. And because of that, I'm going to score it more or less down the middle and give it a retro double like.
All right, cool. All right, so controls for me, it gets the job done. It's basic. You know, you hit the ball, you could bunt, you could throw the ball to all the bases. The controls are very tight. They're solid. You know, I hate saying tight. I always say tight, but what else can you say? Solid, you know? I mean,
right.
I never had any real issues. The only issues I had were like sometimes, you know, catching a ball in the outfield always was an issue for me with these games in the older days. You know, I found it was very difficult to gauge where the ball was going to land, and it was always frustrating because, you know, it doesn't show you. I mean, only in more modern games after the PS2 era where they started to figure out a way to correct that, but this game didn't. So I'm not blaming the game. It's just the baseball games at that time, in that era, it was difficult to catch the ball in the outfield. It was frustrating, very frustrating. That's why I didn't play a lot of baseball games in that era. I don't think I played any baseball games in the NES era. And even in the Genesis era, I did play it, but I just didn't really enjoy it as much as the hockey games. But so I'm a little biased there in the terms of controls, and I think I will penalize it a little bit because I still feel they should have figured out a way to make it a little more intuitive in the outfield. But anything in the infield is very easy to deal with, and you know, if you get the ball in the infield, you could get an easy double play or even a triple play. I didn't pull any triple plays, but I'm sure a double play is very doable. But anything in the outfield, for some reason, just gets to me. So the controls don't really work for the outfield. So that's going to reflect my score, and I'm going to give it controls a like for controls.
Fair. Totally understand where you're coming from too, and I agree. They were tough to gauge. A lot of baseball games back then in the 8-bit were it was tough to gauge any fly balls, especially if they were hit hard and they weren't floaters.
Oh yeah. You really gotta get the hang of it and really instinctually know where that ball is going. And I didn't play it long enough, but in the past I have, so I was frustrated back then and today regardless. So anyways, it's a like for me. Alright, so moving on to difficulty. What'd you think of the difficulty of this game, CK?
I like the difficulty in this game. For the most part, for me anyway, playing the game, it comes with playing the teams. And the way to mitigate and manage difficulty in this game really is to build your team to make them a better team. The team management part of this game I do like as well. That's where a lot of the depth of this game comes in as well. And you find yourself figuring out the game early. Like after playing 2 or 3 teams and realizing, this is a heavy hitting team. This is a fast team. This team is really centered around pitching. And just like in regular baseball teams, hockey teams, any sports teams really, each team has their own kind of unique flavor, and that's where you can manage your difficulty. I didn't find the game that difficult. I mean, outside of just being an 8-bit baseball game, which comes with its own difficulty. I think it was good. I don't think it was really hard, but it's definitely not easy, but it's easy-ish. And I'll give difficulty a little higher than normal rating, and it gets a retro double like from me.
Well, you still love this game. Well, double liking it is love in my book, so yeah.
Okay.
I know, maybe we should change the rating, because a double like sounds like a cheat, but no, we're sticking with the double likes. Yeah, a double like is still, in my opinion, just slightly under a love. Alright, so difficulty for me, you're right, it's not a difficult game. You need to put some time into it and get a little bit familiar with the controls to appreciate the game. I don't have that time and patience, but from my history of playing these types of games, they were a little more difficult than I'd liked it to be, because I still feel it's difficult to gauge when to hit the ball, how to hit a home run, and all that stuff. You really have to get good at it and understand it, and I never really had the patience to get good at a baseball game. Maybe in the PS3 era, in the PS4 era, when I played some baseball games games and actually, enjoyed them.
Yeah.
But not in this era. So I'm making contact, but most of the hits that I'm getting are like flyouts and a couple of base hits here and there. I wasn't able to get any home runs, so that frustrated me. Difficulty seems middle ground, but depending on your skill level, which my skill level in baseball games are pretty low in that era, it's going to affect my score.
Right.
It's not a crazy difficult game, but because I suck at them, I'm going to penalize this game a little bit and give it a like for difficulty.
Oh, that's a penalize? Wow.
I was toying with a half like, but I feel that was too harsh.
You're a very generous man, RL.
Yeah, I thought a like is fair. I mean, I'm giving it middle ground. Alright, so moving on to the fun factor. What did you think of the fun factor in this game?
I enjoyed the game, and I think it's a fun game. I don't think it's an amazing game, and that doesn't contradict anything that I'm saying in here. I mean, I love things that I love, and I love elements of games without having to love a whole game. The game's fun. Building your team is probably the best thing. Playing a team with a season is probably more exciting than just playing the game outright with a selected team. A friend of mine back who introduced me to this game back in grade 5, he built teams and he kept stats because him and his brother were huge baseball guys. They've played baseball for the better part of 22 years of their life. So they played tournaments within this game. They've played each other. They've played the PC. I've been part of all of that, and the fun is ramped up when you have more people playing this and playing different teams within a season. So to me, Fun Factor gets a retro love.
Oh, retro love. Alright, we're definitely scoring this game differently. That's cool. Alright, so fun factor for me, I think I'm prejudiced to baseball games from this era. I really am. I'm trying to like this game. I really did enjoy elements of the game. I just don't know if I have the same amount of fun, and obviously I don't have the experience you have with this game. I never grew up with this game. I remember Blades of Steel and having fun with my friends, so if I was, reviewing Blades of Steel right now, I would give it probably a double love for fun. Maybe if I experienced it like you did in the past and had extreme experiences with friends playing this game, my score would be different. I hate to do it. I really don't know how to score it in fun other than the elements that I play today. I just don't see as much fun in it because so I'm being biased. I'm trying to give it a fair score. There's no nostalgia goggles, obviously, but I'm also trying to realize that I gotta think of it from the era that it came out, because it's not, you can't compare it to this era. If I'm comparing it to this era, it'd be a retro Loath, double Loath, But I'm going to give it, for fun, I'm gonna say it's a, hate to do it, a half like for fun for me, because I didn't really have as much fun with this game, even though I did like a lot of the elements and the gameplay was solid. But for me, I just can't say it's a love or even a like, so it's a half like for me. I feel terrible, I really do. I wanted to like it more, but
I mean,
yeah,
you got to be fair to yourself, and you got to be fair to the game. And based on what you've put in, you can only be fair with what you put in. You're only gauging what you know. I've got decades of history with this game. You've got maybe 10 hours.
So, not even 10 hours, more like a half an hour or an hour max,
Right.
So I wasn't timing it, but I tried to put some time into this game. Obviously you can't review it unless you do. So yeah, half like. So moving on to the replay value, because there is obviously no story. So what do you think of the replay value in this game, CK?
I think with most sports game, replay value should instantly be like literally A5. A double like should be fair. I'm just going to cut to the chase and say replay value for me gets a retro love, because when I was introduced to the game, it was just another baseball game. When I got to feel how the game can be experienced with multiple players and the depth in which you can enjoy this game and play it on the management side as well as the creation side and just straight up, simple baseball. I love it.
Yeah.
So it gets a retro love for me.
Awesome. I think it's safe to say you're on the high end today.
Safe to say.
Safe to say. We don't even have to tabulate the scores. We know you're the high. All right, so replay value for me. There is replay value of any sports game. If you enjoy it, there's going to be replay value because you want to play it again. I think replay value goes hand in hand with sports games, because if you don't like it, why would you even put it in to begin with. You'd probably give it back to the store you got it from if there was no replay value, because you better have replay value in a sports game because you're going to play a lot of it, and there's not a lot of depth. In most sports games, there's depth, but not as depth as, let's say, an adventure game or like an action game where you're playing a story. Obviously, in the NES era, you didn't have a lot of those games, but I'm just saying sports games are a little bit more shallow than the most of these games that came out at the time. I hate to say shallow, maybe it's a bad statement to say it like that, but there wasn't as much you could do in these games. They're very simplistic in nature when you're playing it. Not saying there's settings and all that extra stuff that you can make your own teams, that adds some depth to it, but the actual stuff on the actual screen that you're doing, it's a lot of repetitiveness, you know? A lot of repetitiveness. You're going to be catching the ball, you're going to be hitting the ball, you're going to be pitching the ball. So basically, there's a ton of replay. It's going to be, everything is redundant. It's almost like Groundhog Day in sports games, you know? So it's an oxymoron to say there's a replay. Replay value for this, because I don't have the experience and I'm rambling, I'm just going to give it a like and try to move on. So let's move on to the influence. What do you think of the influence of this game?
So the game has spawned 5 sequels, and that in itself goes to show that it's had a massive influence, not just the baseball side of things, but within the retro, I guess for us, the retro game era, the 8-bit, 16-bit era. So it gets a 2.
Alright, that's fair. Influence for me, I mean, it's going to be hard for me to gauge it. It's a baseball game. I don't know how much influence it would have had in the industry of baseball if they didn't have this game come out for the NES. Would there still be baseball games to this day? Would they still be making baseball games? I think they would. I don't really know how influential it is. I never heard of it, but just because I never heard of it doesn't mean it's not influential. I'm going to be safe and just give it a 1 because I'm sure there was influence, because any game that has 5 sequels in that era and its time was influential. I just don't know if it's a 2. So I'm going to give it a 1. Alright, so this is the portion of review where we flip a coin to see who gets to choose the next game for us to review in our next review. So what is the game that you're picking and I'm going to pick after you?
Sure, Bad Dudes.
Oh, nice. And I choose Golden Axe. Now, I believe I flipped last time, so it's your turn to flip. You're the high, so heads is high as always.
Alright, here we go. Heads.
What a shock, CK.
Bro, I can't fake this, man. This is just
crazy.
Or at least
we'll
the
just
nature
let
of the show.
the retro karma settle where they settle. All right. So what game do you choose, CK?
I really like Golden Axe.
I know you do.
Let's go with Golden Axe.
All right. Awesome. The classic game for the Sega Genesis. So we're back to Sega. Yeah, it's been a while. I'm happy because I love the Sega Genesis. All right. So that's a review on a classic baseball game from the NES era. So thanks for being here, CK.
Thank you for allowing me to pick a cool game and enjoy it and share it with everybody.
Alright, on that note, we will have more retro content in the weeks, months, and years to come. Bye for now.
Ciao, folks.